Hi everyone, I'm going to give it just a few seconds here just to let everybody pop in and then we will get started. All right. My name is Sarah Warner. I am the CML Engagement and Communications Manager, and I would like to welcome you to this webinar and thank you for attending. Today, we'll be talking about Smart Cities 101, Elements of Smart Government Part 2. So this is a continuation of Part 1, which we did on Tuesday. This webinar is being recorded and the handouts in the recording will be posted to our website at www.cml.org under training materials. For those of you who aren't familiar with the GoToWebinar platform, you should see a control panel to the top right of the screen. You will have an orange arrow to the left of the panel, which will minimize the entire box. All participants will be muted for the webinar, but are encouraged to ask questions by typing them into the question box on the control panel. We will hold Q&A near the end of the webinar as time permits, so please feel free to type the questions as you think of them throughout the presentation. At this time, I would like to hand things over to Johanna Jameson with the Colorado Smart Cities Alliance. Johanna, take it away.
Thank you so much, Sarah. We're really excited to be here today to present part 2 of this series on the elements of smart government. And I just want to begin by giving you a quick preview of kind of how the agenda for today will go. If you attended on Tuesday, it will be a very similar format, just with different speakers. So we're going to begin with a quick kind of introduction to the topic of smart cities and an introduction of today's panelists. And then we'll have Ryan Trujillo with Colorado Springs kind of take the stage for about 10 minutes. He's going to share a short overview of what they're working on from a smart cities perspective, especially as they relate to the 4 elements of smart government that we'll be covering today. And then for the following 10 minutes, Seth Hoffman at Lone Tree will do the same for his jurisdiction. And finally, we'll wrap up with about 30 minutes of kind of a moderated panel discussion. So we get to pick these experts' brains. Please be thinking of questions. We would love to have some audience engagement there. They're amazing resources and we want there to be a lively discussion. So with that, I'll go ahead and jump in. I want to begin by letting you know all a little bit about the Colorado Smart Cities Alliance, and actually even before that, introducing myself. My name is Johanna Jameson, and I'm the Program Director at the Colorado Smart Cities Alliance. We are an organization that is a nonprofit. We're based here in Denver, and we were founded to create technology partnerships that prove next generation solutions to improve Colorado's quality of life. So as you might imagine, a key partner and kind of a key element in that is working closely with local government. And I'll talk a little bit more about our local government partners in just a moment. But we're really proud to be the nation's largest statewide network of this kind. We are really leading the way in many respects. And our whole purpose and our model is built to accelerate civic innovation. And we do that through building partnerships, through providing education like this webinar, by doing a lot of research and also providing consulting to help folks do more in smart cities and discover the potential of this incredible field. So the images that you see on the bottom are kind of a representation of the network that we maintain here at the Alliance. On the left-hand side, you'll see our member governments. These are public sector agencies, jurisdictions that have an interest in smart cities. They're scattered all across the state, and we're happy to have 2 of them here today to present with us on this webinar. And on the right-hand side, you'll see that we also have a number of private sector partners or companies that provide some type of smart city solution and that are really committed to moving smart cities together in a collaborative way. I also want to mention that we work with a number of what we call allied partners who don't necessarily fit either of these categories, but they might be institutions of higher education, research laboratories, and other nonprofit organizations that are allied with our mission. So that's a little bit about us and our interest and our involvement in this topic and why we're here chatting with you all today. So smart cities is part of our organization's name, and it seems like it should be a foregone conclusion what that term means, but we actually find that there are quite a few different definitions of it. So I want to start by talking a little bit more about how we define that at the Alliance. A lot of people hear this term and think that it's all about technology, devices, sensors, whatever kind of the latest and greatest cutting edge shiny object out there is. And we feel a little bit differently about that. We think that instead of all of those things defining smart cities, it's really more about the process by which cities and communities and governments solve their problems. So we take kind of a problem first approach rather than finding a cool solution and figuring out where to fit it in. So the way that we define smart government based on all of that is that they are innovative problem solvers, collaborative partners, and technology enthusiasts in that order. So again, the emphasis here is really on the approach, the philosophy, the values, not necessarily technology for technology's sake, because that's truly not what we believe in. And hopefully you'll see some of that reflected in the remarks from both Ryan and Seth. Another thing I want to point out here is that smart cities is a very commonly known term, but what we're trying to do is move a little bit more towards smart government, because we believe that these concepts and this approach is helpful and relevant and valuable for towns, villages, metro districts, whatever it might be. We don't think this is just kind of an urban issue. We think it's for everybody and can add value in a number of different community types. So how do we actually achieve smart cities? Well, we're going to dive more into this topic here on the webinar. But again, most publications, plans, studies, etc., on this topic really point to things like solutions, ways to get smarter. And some of the buzzwords that you might be hearing in the industry are digital twins, 5G, autonomous vehicles, fiber, artificial intelligence, maybe even machine learning. And while those are all really exciting, cool, unique solutions that we certainly want to be aware of and learn how to leverage, what we really need to start with is, what are we trying to accomplish? What do our communities need? And then how do we do that? Instead of, again, what's available out there and how can we plug it into our community? So again, it's a little bit of a change in thinking, and we just like to begin with this idea of having a more expansive view of what smart cities can be and starting with the problems that need solving. And I think this graphic does kind of a nice job summing that up. It's thinking about cities in terms of the systems that comprise them, how people interact in cities and move around, again, towns, villages, community centers, whatever they might be, and thinking kind of more on a holistic level about all of these topics. So through our work with all of our member jurisdictions, right now we have 26 and we're always welcoming more, we have learned a lot about what truly makes government smart in our definition. And going back to that idea, it's really the means and the process by which they determine the right solutions to meet their community needs. So with all of this learning, we started asking ourselves, what processes are commonly shared across smart governments? What do they have in common? What do they all do really well? What matters to them? What priorities do they have? And then when we figure out that process piece, what structures actually make up that process? And by asking ourselves these questions, we developed a resource that we call Elements of Smart Government, and it serves as kind of the basis for this webinar series. So there are 8 elements of smart government. You can read all about them on this slide. Governance, data and outcomes, partnership, funding and procurement, capacity, values, culture, and finally community engagement. And as you might imagine, there's a lot to unpack in each of these elements. Today's webinar is really going to be focused on those final 4 elements because we covered the first 4 in the initial installment. Really quick before we dive into the elements that we'll be talking about today, we just want to let you all know this isn't necessarily a comprehensive list. Again, this is based on our experience and the successes and in some cases also failures that we've had working within our network to make smart government a reality. It's also not all or nothing. Some of these might be easy to adopt and priorities in your jurisdiction, and others may not be, and that's totally okay. It's really a take what's helpful for you, take what you can use, and then maybe leave the rest. That's okay. And there's also not a particular order or priority. It's not that one is more important or needs to come before 8. They're just, we wanted to organize them somehow, and numbers seem to be a good way to do that. But any way that you want to put these in place is wonderful. So today we'll be focused again on those final 4. Capacity first. Do you have staff resources really dedicated to innovating and to finding new solutions to solve the issues that your community faces? Number 6 is values. Do you have the values in place that really enable this to take root? Do you value innovation? Do you value risk taking? And are those things tolerated and hopefully even embraced in the way that your government works? 7, culture is very closely related to that. Does your culture empower continuous improvement, problem solving, and really doing that at all levels, not necessarily hierarchically, but everybody on the team working in a common interest? And then the final one, of course, community engagement. Do you have a process to engage the folks in your community so that they really understand what these solutions are and how they matter and can make a difference for them in their daily lives? So these are the 4 elements we're going to be digging into. Ryan and Seth will do an excellent job talking more about them as they kind of get boots on the ground. How does this actually take place and look in real communities in Colorado? And with that, I want to introduce our speakers. I apologize, these are looking a little bit more grainy on my end than I had anticipated. But we're very excited to have both Ryan and Seth with us today. Ryan Trujillo is the Director of Support Services at the City of Colorado Springs. He's also an Alliance board member, and he's done some really wonderful, innovative things in Colorado Springs regarding smart cities, so he'll be glad to talk about those. And then next, we'll hear from Seth Hoffman. He's the city manager in the city of Lone Tree. He's also an Alliance board member, and again, really has done an amazing job with implementing smart cities in his community. So with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Sarah. And then after that, Ryan will begin, and he'll take about, again, 10 minutes to talk more about Colorado Springs smart city efforts overall and how they relate to these 4 elements.
Okay, Ryan, you can go ahead and get started. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for that introduction, Johanna. Really appreciate it, and I appreciate always sharing the stage with Seth as well. We're 2 board members of the Alliance and have really been involved from the beginning, and it's great to see the Alliance grow to what it is today, grow in terms of capacity, which is a topic that we'll be discussing today from the Alliance as well. So even as a nonprofit, bringing all of these stakeholders and private sector partners together, there is a need to develop that capacity within these organizations in order to push these projects and initiatives forward. So happy to be here. To give you a quick overview, and I'll try very, very hard to keep it to 10 minutes. I could talk smart cities all day, as I'm sure Johanna and Seth can as well. But we started our smart cities journey back in 2017. We do consider smart cities as a journey, not a destination, as we will continue to innovate and drive that culture within our internal organizations as well as the broader community for many years to come is our intention. How it started in 2017 in Colorado Springs is really the top-down approach, which has pros and cons. I think the biggest benefit that we've seen as it relates to the culture element of smart cities is that having that top-down support, and our mayor, John Suthers, really standing up a smart cities program from the ground up has really led to the success of our program. So back in 2017, I was the innovation manager for the city, and really he wanted, and that my title was changed when we started Smart Cities from contract compliance manager, which I still deal with some citywide contracts and other activities for the city, but really wanted to have that emphasis around innovation and smart cities. So it was shortly after he was the mayor where through the CML and other organizations and him learning about the value of smart cities, really assigned me to work on this as other duties as assigned. Initially, I spent probably anywhere from 10 to 20% of my bandwidth around smart cities when we first launched this. And really what we did is took an inventory of other cities across the nation, did some benchmarking across the world on where do communities, where do cities start when it comes to smart cities. And what we found very early is that developing a strategy and having focus, as Johanna alluded to, I mean, we don't want to chase technology just for the sake of chasing technology. We do see some valuable use cases that will improve city services or the quality of life for our citizens, but we wanted to make sure that we had a focused approach, as well as engaging our community through that, which is a big element of smart cities, community engagement. And so early on, we did we called it an Ideation Summit. It was an all-day event. We had a technology partner, Panasonic, City Now, at the table as well to really unleash some of the thoughts around what smart cities can be, and showed some use cases and things going on throughout the world related to IoT and smart cities. But really, it was an all-day event. We brought in internal city departments, pretty much every department within the city of Colorado Springs, as well as about 60 of our regional stakeholders. And so it was a very robust community engagement process, where we basically developed 11 initial concepts of smart cities to pursue. I won't go through each one of those. They can be listed. They are listed on our website at coloradosprings.gov/smartcos for all of the products that we have underway, as well as our initial planning documentation. But that was a really good effort to really set the foundation for a programmatic approach to smart cities. We don't want smart cities to be a buzzword. I think anyone in this space sees the value of smart cities, and it can be just the next buzzword. I also handle our sustainability efforts for the city as well, and that can also be just more of a buzzword. And so we want to take these concepts, there can be very vague, mean different things to different people. We want to turn those into actionable results for the city. And so another way in which we've incorporated that is tying it back to our values, and the values of a city in most cities is our strategic plan. And so we've looked, as part of that Ideation Summit and developing our strategy early on, it's looking at the values of our city through the strategic plan and how can smart cities align with moving some of those strategic initiatives of the city forward in an impactful way. And so in 2017, we published that initial strategy document. And since then, we've moved into the pilot implementation phase, where we are actually implementing technologies in the city's right-of-way. Some of them have been identified in the initial plan. Others have been a little bit more reactionary in terms of things like 5G. 5G wasn't really on the table for Colorado Springs in 2017, and due to the private sector looking to make investment in 5G in our community, that's definitely something that we took on as part of our smart cities effort, because connectivity, whether that be wireless connectivity or fiber connectivity, is foundational to become a smart city and a smart community. So we developed that strategy, have been working on implementing projects, and really the intention is to build that community, build that stakeholder engagement, drive innovation throughout the city. And that's one thing, even though we have the support services department, which is what I oversee, there is an office of innovation. So we've grown from, in terms of our capacity, we've grown from 10 to 20% of my time to now we have 5 dedicated positions. We actually have an innovation manager position that's currently open if anyone is interested in getting in this space, and that could be found on at coloradosprings.gov. But we now have dedicated resources focused on smart city efforts or innovation overall. We have a data scientist. The data is a big element of smart cities, and I know I'm not alone in terms of our city not utilizing the data that we can or making that information available to the public the best we can. We have a few analysts in the department pushing forward that act as project managers for specific initiatives. We have a telecommunications specialist, where that was really an evolution of 5G and our cable franchise agreements to dedicate some of that revenue that the city is receiving to hire a position specifically focused on telecommunications. That position has evolved into smart streetlight efforts, other efforts related to smart cities as well. So we've been creative in terms of funding that. If you just say, hey, I want a new position for smart cities projects, As most cities, it's difficult to get new FTEs, and so we've had to look for revenue generating opportunities, really go to bat in terms of a business case for adding positions, and now here we are 4 years later with a dedicated staff of 5 people for the city pushing these efforts forward. So it wasn't easy by no means, but it's starting small, proving the value to the organization, and through the efforts of the office and the resources that we dedicate, there will be a return on investment, and that's always been a key part of justifying new positions and gaining that capacity. The culture, values, and community engagement has been something that's kind of interwoven on our Smart Cities program. We took a programmatic approach, so we call our program Smart COS for Smart Colorado Springs, and really engaging the community has been something that's been one of the most exciting parts of this. Because of course, we as a city, we have our own initiatives that we're pursuing around smart cities, around smart streetlights, electric vehicles, microgrids, 5G, our building management system, smart fleet efforts. So we have some things that are municipal focused, but the greatest part about this community engagement aspect is we see smart city projects starting to come out in our community that are through a community partner. For example, Fort Carson, which is a military installation on base who has been involved in our strategic development of the program from the beginning, they've implemented a autonomous vehicle project, a demonstration project on the installation itself, which is very exciting. We have a seat at that table. We're learning from the work that they do. The installations are learning from the work that the city does, and we're all sharing this information through the Alliance and building that culture of innovation, not only within the city municipal organization, but throughout our community and through the Alliance throughout our state. So I believe I'm right at 10 minutes. Again, I could talk at length on this, but I'll hand it over to Seth and look forward to the Q&A and more of the discussion aspect of this panel.
Cool. Well, thanks, Brian. It must be not as hot down in Colorado Springs today because there's no ties when it's above 90 degrees for us. So thanks for the introduction. Thank you, Johanna and CML, for having us here today. Really excited to share a little bit about Lone Tree's journey. I like the way Ryan put that. It is certainly a journey, not a destination. And our journey started actually with our strategic plan, kind of before Smart Cities was a concept. I would say in our strategic plan that we started when I became city manager in 2014, we set a mission and vision, and then our big ideas are kind of what we call our 6 kind of guideposts of where we want to head. But our mission is to achieve our vision the best way, not the expected way. And I think that plays really well into smart cities and the way that we use technology to maybe solve problems or to bring new services that we would have never contemplated in the past. And I think this last year, now last year and a half, has really actually, if you want to find a silver lining, I would say that the silver lining has been the amount of innovation that has come out of the changes forced by COVID restrictions. Specifically, obviously, I mean, just the fact that I'm presenting to you from my home office would not be something that I would have ever dreamed of doing 2 years ago. But now we have, and I'm sure most other organizations have a much more robust, and lenient work from home policy. We found that, just the quality of life from some of our police officers that work the midnight shift, sometimes when we have an all staff meeting, they would have to come in or stay after their shift or come in basically in the middle of what should be their sleep time. Now they're able to just, they still have to join the meeting, but they can join virtually. And some of those that don't live real close by, that's a major quality of life improvement. And then the last one I want to mention that was really forced by the pandemic, but I don't see it going back, is we have a really cool teen court program with kind of an alternative justice system, more focused on teens and much better outcomes than having them go through the normal court process. We started doing virtual meetings or virtual hearings for that, which again, not something that was contemplated, but now something that we will keep doing. It's safer. It's actually easier for people to get here, especially, you know, our courtroom doesn't have great transit access, for example, and so and that's the case of a lot of courtrooms. So I think that that's something that we're really happy with and not going to return to. When we talk about, so that's kind of how things are baked into our values. It's really in our strategic plan, right at the mission from the very beginning. As far as culture goes, we were talking, actually, or debriefing. We have an internal leadership program called Leadership Lone Tree that I'm sure is like many other organizations, where a group of employees just gets exposed one day at a time to different department or different department leaders, and then have a project, a leadership project that they all do. We were debriefing with them the other day, and we were listing all of the things that, you know, the different things like the teen court, virtual meetings. It's like the other PD example that I gave, and it just went on and on and on, the list of things that kind of came out of the last year and a half, sort of because we were forced to. My challenge to them was, how do we keep up this culture of innovation, but without the pandemic, right? I mean, let's keep this going, but you know, not because we're forced to, but now because we've built this muscle and we want to keep it staying strong. And so I'm really excited about that. One of the ways that we're going to do that is we formed a innovation team. And so our setup is a little different from Ryan's. We're obviously a smaller organization with just about you know, less than 150 total full-time employees, and you know, a population of 15,000. But I think, you know, I love what Ryan and Colorado Springs and some bigger communities are doing, but I think the opportunities for smaller communities and smaller organizations are there too. And so we don't have any dedicated staff dedicated to sustainability or to smart cities, but we've kind of deputized everybody in the organization to think of themselves think of that as part of their role. And so we do have a new innovation team where I would say 10 or so folks from across different departments are all thinking about you know, what we can do to keep the innovation moving forward. And it doesn't have to be, you know, it's not a big time commitment for any of these, you know. So for a planner, or for the assistant to the city manager, or somebody in public works, you know, it's just as simple as creating a, you know, a Teams channel or a Slack channel or whatever you use, and, you know, sharing ideas, meeting once in a while, but really thinking about how we can get some cross-functional innovation moving. So I'm excited about, you know, maintaining that capacity, but again, like Ryan said, adding new FTEs is a significant challenge for us, and so being able to get that kind of work done with existing employees is really important. I think, and then the engagement part. So as far as engagement goes, engaging with the community obviously is a key thing. We're actually working right now. We're contemplating referring a sales tax initiative on the for the November ballot, which is not something that we've ever done before in the city's history. And so going out and spending a lot more time engaging with the community, both, you know, residents and the business community and visitors, sort of about what that means. And one of the things that a lot of people, you know, want to hear is, what's the return on investment? You know, it's not, it's an ability to say, okay, well, we are asking for this, you know, additional revenue for a couple reasons, but the question we get is, well, what have you done to, you know, be more efficient? What have you tried, you know, to do to, you know, keep within the you know, previous revenue limitations? And so we have such a great story to tell with the smart city work we've done, also just the other innovations, because I would say that almost all of them have been, cost neutral or cost saving improvements when you look at the big picture. And so I think that has actually helped us with our community credibility as we move forward and look at this, needing the community support for this, revenue enhancement. But I'm really happy that it's not seen as an extra or as a something that's not necessary. It's seen. I can tell from the community that they do see it as a way that we can be more efficient and save taxpayer dollars. So I think I'll stop there, and I'm really looking forward to questions and discussion. So thank you.
Thank you, Seth and Ryan. I think those were really helpful overviews and hopefully give people kind of a good launching pad for maybe sparking some questions. So for the audience, feel free to send those through. Sarah can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's a question function in your webinar, and you can just type any questions that you might have there, and we can take those that way. But while you're thinking about what you want to know and ask, I will kind of start with a couple different questions. One of the things I heard from both of you is that this work is really embedded and prioritized into some of your foundational plans, strategic plans and plans kind of the like. And so I'm curious, when you were undergoing those processes, how you made sure that this way of thinking remained front and center, given all of the different pressing priorities and considerations that need to be considered, for lack of a better term, in a strategic planning process. If either of you could speak to that, anyone can go first.
Go ahead, Seth.
Okay, so yeah, I think that it starts with having the right people on the bus, just like everything, right? And so we actually, ask questions about sort of what people's, intellectual curiosity is like. That's one of the things that's really something I like to probe a little bit in an interview process is, what are you interested in, and what do you like learning more about? And you find that if people are doing, reading on their own time about, a variety of different things, they're going to be, there's some correlation there with the culture of innovation. And so having that kind of personal curiosity is something that we actually hire for a little bit. And so that makes it easier. So that, just having the right people keeps it front and center, I think, right off the bat. And then, we also just have really terrific support from our elected officials. Just like what Ryan said about Mayor Suthers, we have similar, very supportive mayor and council who really do give us a lot of room to try new things, and they're also patient with us when it doesn't work the way that we say we thought it would. And I think that's something that is not easy and maybe not normal. So I think that that's a really key piece as well.
Yeah, and I'll just add, the ability or the possibility of failure has to be accepted by the elected officials and those in leadership positions. And I think Seth and I, Lone Tree and Colorado Springs, are fortunate to have top-down support. Seth's a city manager, and he's driving innovation from his position as city manager. At the mayoral level here in Springs, it is driven down, but that grassroots effort that Seth touched on, and having champions in the departments, especially, I would assume most cities, maybe not most, but there is a centralized approach and a decentralized approach. The challenge with a centralized approach is getting those champions. We never want to be viewed as, the Office of Innovation, they're the ones that innovate. We don't have to innovate. And so a lot of the work that we do is developing those champions in the departments and helping educate and help them understand. If you're working on a new park project in your city, how can you add some incremental costs to make those projects more more valuable by adding the technology and emerging technology for those projects. And one example that came up recently was lightning detection notifications. You know, it's and working with the department to help them, even though the budget request is coming from our Park and Rec department, how can we add elements of smart cities into those large CIP projects to really just add a small incremental cost and add a lot of value to citizens when there is lightning and you need to evacuate. You get a big horn and it's no longer kind of subjective for each of the families that are there at the park. So getting those champions in the departments is critical. And then, you know, when you have that top-down leadership, I think it's in this, I know it's in the city's vision. The word innovation is there, and it's not there just as another buzzword, but it truly is driven at every manager meeting, any all hands meeting with the city, you know, talking about innovation consistently and looking for and empowering employees at every level of the organization to bring up new ideas and to have those ideas being heard by the management teams and supervisors. It's an ongoing process. It's not easy. There's, as with any organization, there's some that are supportive of innovation and change and others that are not, but it's something that we continue to fight the good fight to get those champions and keep innovation front and center.
Thank you for that. I'm curious, Ryan, you mentioned you both are lucky to be in jurisdictions where this is supported and embraced. For anyone on the call or on the webinar who may not feel like that and may potentially need to lay some groundwork, so there is support from the executive or leadership level, are there any other tips or recommendations that either of you might have to kind of get that ball rolling a little bit?
That is a great question and a difficult one. You know, if there's not support on the top, smart cities, I think it's something again that the bottom up and top down support is what makes it absolutely successful. But in order to get that top down support, if you don't have that initially, I think it starts with quick wins and starting small and then growing the successes. So if it's an individual in a particular department, you know, ways that we can incorporate smart cities technologies or incorporate the partnerships with a certain stakeholder that's outside of the city and the value that they bring to a certain project. It's highlighting those. I know, you know, it's sometimes difficult to just, hey, I'm going to tout my own horn and talk about the value of this project that I just did. But I think that in terms of gaining top support, leadership support, you have to tell your story, even if it's just a small, you know, a relatively small, or you view it as a small success. It's still highlighting those successes and then building that momentum within your department, getting others in other departments, and maybe even starting a grassroots process improvement type of a team where it's not driven from the top, but hey, we're all going to get together and talk through ways that we can work on process improvement on a specific project or specific process that we have within our city. I know the City of Denver did the Peak Innovation, or I'm sorry, the Peak Academy, and that's something that I think was developed from the ground up more organically, and I've set in on that training, and we've actually tried to bring that back to Colorado Springs as well. So there's things that can be done that truly add value to your department, and your management team would see value in as well. And it's just trying to create a snowball and that snowball effect and build upon those successes.
Yeah, I think the other thing I would suggest is you know, building the package, and I think that's what Ryan's done when he's talking about, you know, creating some of these new positions. Is he's you know, presenting the whole package that is not just the expenditure, but also what the potential revenue side of it is, or what if it's not revenue, what are the other outcomes, and you know, happy residents and happy voters are, you know, that's a good motivator for elected officials too sometimes. And so I think that that's just, you know, presenting it, the whole everything, not just here's what we're going to do, but here's what's going to happen if you let us do it. And then the other one is, and I have a really great way to say this, but I would say some council members are a little competitive, with other, they see other people at CML conferences, and they want to be able to talk about, the cool stuff that's happening in their jurisdiction. And I know that that's something that our council members definitely do, and they like hearing about what what's happening in other communities. And then they come back and they say, tell me, you won't believe what I heard that Colorado Springs, is doing. Why aren't we doing that? I said, well, okay, we should. So I think, getting involved in CML, and obviously certainly the Smart City Alliance is a way that, you just get so many great ideas. And I think this was in the first panel, but just talking about the culture of collaboration between obviously communities, but also now with the private sector as well, and really having the rising tide lift all boats is something that I think we're really able to do in local government, more so than almost any other sector. So maybe we can talk a little bit more about that, but I'll stop there.
We can definitely talk more about that, Seth, now or later, whenever works.
Oh, yeah, I think one thing to build upon that is, even though we've taken kind of a programmatic approach, one point that we always try to make, especially when we're talking internally, is that just because we have a smart cities program, quote unquote, doesn't mean that we weren't smart before. It doesn't mean that we didn't innovate and implement technologies that benefit the citizens. And so just as Seth has done with, kind of brainstorming all the benefits that have come from COVID, doing that on a regular basis to highlight, even though it's not a program, I'm sure every city out there has deployed some IoT devices in their buildings for HVAC controls, for example. And so it's taking an inventory of what your city's currently doing, looking for those things that have a tie to smart cities and sensors and IoT and that collaboration piece, and highlighting those and building upon those. I think that's a great point.
So I want to delve into a topic that we talked a little bit about earlier, and that is failure and the importance of having a certain tolerance or acceptance for a degree of that, because we're trying new things, we're being innovative. If you guys could just give an example of maybe a challenge that was unexpected that you came up against in a smart cities project perhaps that you were working on, and how you were able to overcome that. I think the more we talk about this, the better that we can be at kind of going in eyes wide open and then ultimately being successful despite setbacks.
Seth, I think you're muted there.
18 months and still, we started a cool program, I think it was in 2016, 2017, a on-demand shuttle system. And we actually partnered with Uber on it, where you could use the Uber app to summon a shuttle, and we shared rides. And it was, we think, kind of the first of its kind for a municipality. And so it was working out really well for about a year or so. And then Uber let us know that they were changing their platform, upgrading, doing a change to their app and platform, and that kind of thing wouldn't work with the new platform. And so we were kind of out of luck and didn't have a partner. We actually flew to San Francisco to meet with Uber at the Uber headquarters and tried to convince them that they should try to influence their entire corporate strategy and let us stay on the platform, but we were not successful. So we had to find a new partner for something that really hadn't been invented yet. So I was worried that we would lose out, but as it turned out, it is kind of becoming more of a maturing market. We did do an RFP or RFQ or something like that, and we did find a great partner. So I think that's one of the things that you have to be a little cautious about is who you hitch your wagon to. And sometimes you might think, well, a startup might not be as stable, and you'd be a little cautious about, worried about them not making it, and then what? But the same thing can happen with, the biggest company, one of the biggest companies in the world, Uber, right? They just decided this is not something we're going to do, and you need to find something else, somebody else to work with. So it was a setback, but eventually we came to a good solution.
Yeah, and I have a couple examples that I'll share. The first is around snow depth sensors. And so I think this is an area where the engagement, actually both of these examples, the engagement internally was the biggest detriment to the success of a project. And so we have had a great idea, still have the idea in terms of a use case to deploy sensors that track the depth of snow on our roadways. It's a pretty pricey sensor, so it was very limited. I think we only did 6 snow depth sensors in each of the council districts of Colorado Springs. And our intention was eventually this will help inform our public works department on where they should deploy snow plows. And so we did some engagement with the public works department, but certainly not as much as we should have. And I think that came to fruition with when we're actually collecting the data. There were some key things that the public works department's going to do regardless of where the snow is falling in a particular area, mainly because they're mandated to. So, there's certain routes that they're gonna, especially during an active storm, they have to keep main arteries with hospitals, police stations. That's their focus. They don't focus on anywhere else other than those. So, that would have been great to know before we actually started the project. And so really having that engagement, and especially any department, even if you don't think they're going to be directly involved or directly a stakeholder in the project, it's always good to at least ask and have those conversations with departments and inform them of what you're working on. They might say, oh, that can benefit us as well in some other way. So that we do still have the sensors in place and have kind of shifted the focus, and it's more of one data point in terms of how we can inform the community or internal operations on when we do a snow delay or a closure. And now, with all the virtual things, it's a little bit easier to call a snow day, but there's still some jobs that there will always be jobs that can't be done virtually. And so we're going to make this information available to the public as just one more decision point in factoring late starts or snow closures for snow. The other engagement piece was around our open data program. We launched our open data program a couple years back. We're sharing all of our budget information, and it was really the focus around that was around getting information out to the public. And while on one hand you could say it was successful because we now have information in terms of the city's financials that is available on our open data platform, we really have kind of burned a few bridges and set a few setbacks in terms of not doing all the things related to data that lead up to an open data platform. And so our focus was on getting the information to the public, where in reality our focus should be initially with data governance. How do you classify your data? How is it secured? Do you have a data warehouse where all the information from various systems can be fed and normalized and cleaned? And then what information should be available to the public or not? And so on one hand, it was a success, but on the other hand, we were definitely putting the cart before the horse. And so we've done a lot of work over the past year. That's one of our key efforts, is our data management program, which is led by the Office of Innovation in partnership with our IT department, to really take a step back and make sure that we're not more reactive. During last year, with all the civil unrest related to public safety, we were kind of put in a position reactionary to get our police information available to the public. That was something that was demanded by our community, but we didn't have all the initial upfront steps in place in terms of the governance and the classification. We have a lot of data, but getting that available to the public seems easy, but there's a lot of things that have to be done in order to make sure that information is accurate and can be digestible. to our community. So again, late last year, we were scrambling to get our public safety data available to the public, whereas 2 years ago when we launched our data program, we should have focused on those foundational elements rather than kind of promoting data to our public. And so those are just a few lessons learned. I'm sure I have many other examples as well, but it is that culture of being able to fail. And I want to clarify, if we fail catastrophically, that's something that could be problematic and detrimental to our program. So we are still, it's not like we're willy-nilly taking every risk out there. It's certainly a calculated risk in local government, because even if a mayor is supportive of innovation and ability to fail at times, we have a very unforgiving community citizenry, as we all do, that will highlight those certain things. So it's a calculated risk, but it's still a risk nonetheless that we're willing to take.
Thank you both for being willing to share. I want to point out that both of these gentlemen in their jurisdictions have had way more successes than failures. So these are the anomalies rather than the rule. But thank you both for being open about that. Folks, type your questions into the question box. We would love to answer some questions from the audience. While you're doing that, in the meantime, I'm going to do a little bit of a lightning round. Are you guys ready? And it doesn't have to be that fast. It's a little bit more of a targeted question. So of the 8 elements, actually, you can go beyond the 4 elements that we're talking about today. Which would you say is most critical, and why did you select that? You can have a couple minutes to think on it, and then whoever's ready first can jump in.
I'll start. I think, values, kind of what we talked about earlier, having it just baked into your organization from, bottom to top and top to bottom, and having that buy-in, I think is probably key. What would you say, Ryan?
Yeah, I would agree. Values is definitely one of the top ones, and right behind that, I would say capacity. It's not as front and center as kind of strategic governance policy type things, but if you don't have the capacity to push these initiatives or this program or do the stakeholder engagement, the community engagement, then it definitely lacks and is more challenging. And as Seth explained, you don't need dedicated resources. You can have a coalition of the willing. You can have those that are just interested in innovation and this space in general, and people are willing to volunteer their time to dedicate to these things. As public servants, I started in the private sector and never considered myself a public servant, but now that I'm in local government, it's addicting. I couldn't imagine myself not being in the local government, and I know most people who are in local government feel that same way. So people are going to be willing to contribute to this, and that's a great way to get that initial capacity. If you don't have capacity to do it, then it's all, then it becomes more of a buzzword. So I think that's also important.
That's interesting. When we did our first webinar on this elements resource, we did a poll of the audience, and they had to rank each of the elements by importance. And the top one overwhelmingly was funding and procurement. And I actually don't remember where values fell. So that's good. We're getting different perspectives.
Oh yeah, and funding is another absolute challenge. I mean, we go after every grant that comes out that relates to what we're doing, and that also deals with capacity issues as well. If you do want to go after FTEs, funding is a direct part of that. So I can see why that would be rated high. They're all important. I mean, it's very difficult to narrow down just one or two of all the elements. They're all great elements that have been put together.
Well, you can, when I ask you that question next time, you can change your mind. Well, we won't keep a record of that. Knowing that, Ryan, to your point, now that you're in local government, it resonates with you, you're in it. Knowing that the folks on the line are municipal leaders from all across the state of Colorado, what would be one or maybe two of the most critical pieces of advice or guidance that you might give to these folks if they're interested in exploring or starting or maybe growing an existing smart cities program? or however they decide to structure it. Just one or two of kind of the top things that you would love to pass along, or maybe that you wish you had known before you started on the journey.
I would say the engagement piece, and I know it is an element as well, but that internal and external engagement is absolutely crucial. And I would include as many as you can, as early as you can. Initially, one failure is during our strategic planning process, we didn't include the city clerk's office. And that came back to haunt us because they're looking at, ways to secure voting and work on blockchain for online voting and things, and it was an opportunity that was missed. And so when you're starting, you got some foundations set. It's really engaging every city department that works in your organization, and then those key external stakeholders that will see value in this. We have some startup incubators, our local chamber and EDC. We have a municipally owned utility company who is very interested in doing some very innovative things. That's a key partner of ours. So it's getting those regional partners that also help carry the weight with elected officials. If your chamber or a key stakeholder, whoever that may be in your community, is also promoting smart cities to your elected officials, that helps to Seth's earlier point on they want to hear and talk about exciting things that are happening in their community.
Yeah, and I think the other place, and similar, and I think Ryan mentioned this, is just taking an inventory of what you are already doing. And I think you might be surprised that you have already instituted some smart city initiatives, including remote meetings and or simple things like HVAC sensors. If you've made improvements to your traffic signal system like we have. I think there's probably some surprises out there, and if you just have a short brainstorming session one afternoon with a group from across different departments, I think people might be surprised with what you already are doing, and then that you already have that foundation.
And that's a great point. Right at the heels of COVID, you mentioned, Seth, just that you're talking about how do we keep this innovation going post-COVID. If you have no Smart Cities program and it hasn't been a conversation in your city or your community, now would be a great time because everyone has had to adjust and adapt to COVID and innovate on the fly. And so it's a great opportunity now to continue that momentum.
Great point, and I think those are very actionable takeaways. So hopefully that's valuable for our audience. Last call for questions. Ryan, Seth, is there anything else that you want to share? Parting words of wisdom before we wrap.
I think Ryan and I both would just encourage folks to get involved with the Colorado Smart Cities Alliance. If you are a member, great. If you're not, definitely reach out to any of the three of us. We'd love to chat more. If it's something that you need help convincing your city manager, let me know and I'll help you with that. But I think it's such a great resource, and it's a bargain, right, Johanna? For cities, how much does it cost?
Indeed, it is. It's just agree to work with us. That's right. It.
Can't beat that deal.
Yeah, and to dovetail on that, I think it is, I'm an internal optimist, and as I know most folks are who are in this space, and so the reality is it's very, very challenging. I mean, we're driving change. We're working on internal processes. We're working in local government where we're slow to change. So go into that eyes wide open. It's exciting. It's invigorating on the work that we do, but it's not always easy. And so keeping a good attitude and being able to drive forward through quite a few setbacks. I think it's important to realize that it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Even for the most successful Smart Cities program in the world, there are many, many failures and over things people have to overcome in order to make that successful. So, but it's well worth the time and effort, no doubt.
Well worth it. Well, thank you for wrapping things up on such a good note. I want to thank both of you, Ryan, Seth, thank you for joining me and sharing some very frank insights from your experience. Thank you, Sarah and CML, for hosting this webinar with us, and thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us. With that, Sarah, I will turn it over to you in case there's anything that you need to do before we close out.
Thank you, Johanna and Ryan and Seth. Your presentation today was very informative. We thank all of our listeners for being here today. This webinar was recorded, and the recording, handouts, and presentation materials will all be posted to our website by the end of the week under training materials. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. This concludes our webinar. Have a nice afternoon.
Thank you all.